The beautiful lights hummed their lonely song at 9:30 p.m., casting sterile white across the marble lobby of Meridian Tech headquarters. Most people never noticed the man pushing the yellow mop bucket across those polished floors. They didn't see the way he moved with quiet purpose, or how his weathered hands gripped the mop handle with unexpected gentleness. His name was Robert Hayes, though the night security guard simply called him the janitor, when he bothered to acknowledge him at all. Robert didn't mind being invisible. At 63 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines etched deep around his eyes, he'd learned that invisibility had its advantages. People said things around invisible men. They dropped their masks. They showed you who they really were. Tonight, like every night, Robert arrived at 9 p.m. sharp. He wore the same navy blue coveralls, carried the same dented lunch pail, and nodded the same quiet greeting to whoever sat at the security desk. Tonight it was Derek, a young man who never looked up from his phone. Robert began his rounds on the third floor, in the engineering department. The office was a maze of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms, littered with the debris of ambition. Empty coffee cups, crumpled papers, forgotten dreams. As he emptied a trash can near a junior developer's desk, he noticed something. A framed photograph had fallen behind the computer, face down in the dusty shadows where no one would think to look. Robert bent down, his knees protesting, and retrieved it. The photo showed a young woman in a graduation cap, her smile brilliant with hope. In the corner, written in neat handwriting, "For James, your daughter believes in you. Keep going. Love, Dad." Robert looked at the nameplate on the desk. James Okafor. The name was familiar. He'd seen it on the termination list that had been carelessly left on the breakroom table. James was one of 12 people being let go on Friday. Robert carefully placed the photo upright on the desk where James would see it first thing in the morning. Then he pulled out his phone and made a note. James Okafor, Engineering, find out why. This was Robert's secret practice. For the past 2 months, while the company thought he was simply their night janitor, he'd been watching, learning, understanding the truth that spreadsheets and reports could never show him. He moved through the building like a ghost with a purpose, collecting stories the way others collected data. On the 5th floor, in the marketing department, he found Priya Sharma asleep at her desk, her cheek pressed against a presentation deck. The clock on the wall read 11:52 p.m. Robert had seen her here until past midnight for the last 3 weeks straight. Gently, he draped his own jacket over her shoulders. Then he adjusted the thermostat. Someone had set it to 68 degrees, and the poor woman was shivering. He made another note on his phone. Priya Sharma, Marketing. Why is she working these hours? Check Manager. The 6th floor was executive territory, and here Robert moved even more carefully. He'd learned that this was where truth hid in plain sight. In the wastebaskets of the powerful, you could find the receipts of their character. In the office of Victor Brennan, the chief operating officer, Robert found what he'd been looking for. Crumpled printouts of emails, drafts of a memo. He smoothed one out and read it by the light of his phone. The board is breathing down my neck. We need to show improved margins by Q2. I don't care what it takes, cut staff, reduce benefits, eliminate the scholarship program. They're too comfortable here. Comfort doesn't drive profit. Robert photographed the memo and carefully returned it to the trash, arranging the papers exactly as he'd found them. He thought about his own daughter, Alicia, who had benefited from a corporate scholarship program 20 years ago. That program had sent her to medical school. Now she saved lives in a hospital in Baltimore, and every time Robert saw her, he thanked God for the stranger who had believed in investing in people, not just profits. By 1:30 a.m., Robert had reached the executive kitchen on the 7th floor. This was where the real conversations happened, where assistants and junior executives gossiped over coffee, believing they were alone. But Robert was there, silent and invisible, wiping down counters and restocking supplies. He'd heard it all over the weeks. The affair between 2 senior directors, the nepotism in hiring, the manager who took credit for his team's work, the executive who screamed at her assistant until the young man cried in the bathroom. He'd also heard the good stories. The team lead who stayed late to mentor a struggling intern. The director who anonymously paid for a colleague's father's surgery. The assistant who brought homemade lunch for the security guard every Friday. Robert wrote it all down. Every kindness. Every cruelty. Every moment of truth that happened when people thought no one important was watching. At 3 a.m., he took his break in the basement cafeteria. This was his favorite time when the building felt like it belonged to him alone. He microwaved the dinner his wife Elena had packed, leftovers from Sunday's pot roast, and sat at a table by the window overlooking the sleeping city. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "Can't sleep. Missing you. Come home safe, my love." Robert smiled and texted back. 2 more weeks. Then everything changes. I love you. Elena knew his secret, of course. She'd known for 40 years. Since they were both young and hungry and dreaming of building something meaningful. She'd been his partner in everything. Every risk, every triumph, every late night just like this one. "You don't have to do this," she'd said 2 months ago, when he'd first proposed the idea. "You're the CEO. You built this company from nothing. You can just read reports. Reports tell you what people want you to know," Robert had replied. "I need to know the truth. I need to see who we've become." So he'd quietly stepped back, installed an interim CEO whom only the board knew was temporary, and taken a job as the night janitor under an assumed name. His own HR department had processed his application. His own security team had issued his badge. Not a single person had recognized him. The board had been sworn to secrecy. Even his executive assistant thought he was on an extended sabbatical in Portugal. For 2 months, Robert had walked the halls of the company he'd built 30 years ago, and he'd seen everything. The beauty and the rot. The heroes and the villains. The gap between the company's stated values and its lived reality. Tomorrow would mark his last shift as a janitor. On Monday morning he would return as CEO. And everything he'd learned in the shadows would come into the light. But tonight, he had one more person to observe. At 4 a.m., as he polished the brass railings in the main lobby, the elevator dinged. Out stepped a young woman with exhaustion written in every line of her body. Lena Torres, according to her badge. Junior accountant. She didn't notice Robert as she sank onto one of the leather couches, dropped her head into her hands and began to cry. Robert paused his work but didn't approach. Sometimes the greatest kindness was allowing someone their privacy in grief. After a long moment, Lena pulled out her phone and made a call. "Hi, Mama. I know it's early. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. I got the email. They're eliminating my position. After 3 years. They said it's restructuring. They said it's nothing personal." She listened, tears streaming down her face. "No, Mama, I know. I know you believe in me. But I have rent due next week. And Javi's tuition for state. And your medication." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I'll figure it out. I always do. Go back to sleep. I love you." She ended the call and sat there in the dim lobby, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Robert set down his polishing cloth and approached quietly. "Miss," he said gently, "are you all right?" Lena looked up, startled. She'd clearly forgotten anyone else was in the building. "Oh, yes. I'm fine. Sorry. I should." She started to stand. "Please," Robert said. "Sit. It's okay." She looked at him. Really looked at him, and something in his kind eyes made her shoulders drop. Fresh tears spilled over. "I'm getting laid off," she said. "And I don't know how I'm going to tell my family. My mother is sick. My brother just started college. They're all counting on me and She shook her head. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this." Robert sat down on the opposite couch, maintaining a respectful distance. "My daughter used to say the same thing," he said quietly, "that no one needed to hear her problems. But you know what I told her? Everyone needs to be heard. Especially when they're carrying the weight of the world." Lena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Does it get better?" she asked. "Did it get better for your daughter?" "Yes," Robert said simply, but not in the way she expected. She wanted to be a lawyer. Life had different plans. Now she's a doctor, and she says she's exactly where she's supposed to be. How did she get through the hard part? The part where everything falls apart? Robert considered this. She had people who believed in her. But more importantly, she learned to believe in herself. She learned that her worth wasn't determined by a job title or a paycheck. It was determined by how she showed up in the world, how she treated people, what she chose to do when no one was watching. Lena nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "Robert." "Thank you, Robert. For listening. For being kind." She stood, wiping her eyes. "I should let you get back to work." "Before you go," Robert said, "may I give you something?" He reached into his lunch pail and pulled out a business card. It wasn't his CEO card. Those were locked in his home office. This was something Elena had made for him last week, after he'd told her about the people he'd been meeting. The card was simple white stock with black text. "Your story isn't over. Your worth is infinite. Better days are coming. If you need help, call this number." Below was a phone number. Robert's personal cell phone. Lena took the card, confusion and gratitude warring on her face. "I don't understand," she said. "You don't have to," Robert replied. "Just know that someone sees you. Someone believes in you. And when Monday comes, check your email. Something tells me the story isn't quite finished yet." Lena clutched the card like a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. After she left, Robert returned to his polishing. But he made one more note on his phone. Lena Torres, accounting, excellent employee. Layoff rescinded. Offer promotion and oversight of new community investment program. The sun was beginning to paint the sky pink and gold as Robert finished his shift at 6 a.m. He changed out of his coveralls in the basement locker room, back into his street clothes, jeans and a simple button-down shirt. On his way out, he stopped by the security desk. Derek was still there, scrolling through his phone. "Hey Derek," Robert said. The young man looked up, startled. He clearly hadn't expected the janitor to know his name. "Yeah. I noticed you're always studying something on your phone during your shifts. What are you working on?" Derek's defenses went up immediately. "Nothing. It's nothing. It looks like nursing textbooks," Robert said gently. "My daughter's a doctor. I recognize the diagrams." Derek's face softened slightly. "Yeah. I'm trying to finish my RN degree, taking online classes, but the shifts here are killing my study time, and I can't afford to quit." He shrugged. "It's fine. It'll take a few more years, but I'll get there." Robert nodded. "You will," he said. "You absolutely will. Keep going, Derek. You're going to make an excellent nurse." As he pushed through the glass doors into the morning light, Robert felt the weight of 2 months lifting from his shoulders. He'd seen enough. He knew what needed to be done. The walk to his car took him past the parking garage where the executives parked. There, in a reserved spot near the entrance, sat Victor Brennan's silver Mercedes. On the windshield was a parking ticket. Robert smiled slightly. Even the little things had meaning. Brennan had parked in a spot reserved for expectant mothers. Of course he had. Robert got into his own car, a modest Honda that he'd driven for 10 years, and headed home. Elena would have breakfast waiting. They would sit on their back porch, drinking coffee and watching the birds, and he would tell her everything he'd learned in the shadows. And then together they would plan for Monday. Because on Monday Robert Hayes would stop being invisible. On Monday, the janitor would reveal himself as the CEO. And nothing at Meridian Tech would ever be the same again. Friday afternoon arrived with the cruel efficiency of an executioner's axe. Lena Torres sat at her desk on the 4th floor. The termination email still open on her screen. She'd read it 17 times since receiving it yesterday, each time hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something different. Something kinder. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Please collect your personal belongings and return all company property to HR by end of business today. You will receive 2 weeks severance pay. 2 weeks. After 3 years of 60-hour weeks and skipped lunches and canceled plans with friends because there was always one more report, one more audit, one more fire to put out. Around her, 11 other people were packing their desks into cardboard boxes. James Okafor from engineering stood frozen at his cubicle, staring at the photograph of his daughter that someone had placed upright on his desk. He didn't remember putting it there. Priya Sharma from marketing was crying quietly as she wrapped her favorite coffee mug in bubble wrap. Someone had given her a jacket yesterday. She'd found it draped over her shoulders when she'd woken at her desk. She'd never discovered who. Now she hugged it close, grateful for that small kindness in a place that had shown her so little. Victor Brennan stood near the elevators, watching the exodus with barely concealed impatience. He checked his Rolex, 4:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, these people would be gone, the quarterly numbers would look better on paper, and he'd have something impressive to present at Monday's board meeting. "This is business," he told his assistant that morning. "Nothing personal. They'll land on their feet." He didn't see how James's hand shook as he took down his daughter's photo. He didn't hear Priya's mother on the phone, asking in worried Hindi how they would manage now. He didn't notice Lena gripping a simple white business card like it was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. By 5 p.m., the 12 fired employees had filed out through the lobby, carrying boxes that held 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of their lives. The security guard, Derek, though Brennan had never bothered to learn his name, watched them go with sadness in his eyes. As the last person disappeared through the revolving doors, Brennan's phone rang. The CEO's assistant. "Mr. Brennan, the board has called an emergency meeting for 8 a.m. Monday morning. Mandatory attendance for all C-suite executives." Victor's stomach tightened. Emergency board meetings were never good news. "Did they say what it's about?" "No, sir. Just that it's critical and time-sensitive. Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Hayes will be attending." "Robert Hayes? I thought he was in Portugal." "Apparently not, sir. He'll be there Monday." After she hung up, Victor stood in the empty office, unease creeping up his spine. Robert Hayes, the founder, the man who'd built Meridian from nothing in his garage 30 years ago, the CEO who'd unexpectedly taken a sabbatical 2 months ago, leaving operations to an interim chief executive. Victor had enjoyed those 2 months. Without Hayes' scrutiny, he'd been able to implement the efficiency measures he'd been pushing for years. Cut the fat, trim the excess, run the company like a real business, not a charity. But now Hayes was coming back. The weekend passed with excruciating slowness. Lena spent Saturday updating her resume and Sunday at her mother's bedside, holding her hand and lying about being fine. James drove his daughter back to college and didn't tell her he'd lost his job. Priya numbed herself with Netflix and wine and wondered if she'd ever trust an employer again. And Victor Brennan worked himself into a quiet panic, rehearsing justifications for every decision he'd made. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, threatening rain. At 7:30 a.m., Victor walked into the Meridian Tech building, nodding curtly at Derek, who was ending his night shift. He rode the elevator to the 8th floor, executive territory, and walked into the large conference room where board meetings were held. The room was already half full. Board members sat around the massive oak table, their faces serious. At the head of the table sat an empty chair. Victor took his seat and waited, his pulse loud in his ears. At 7:58 a.m. the door opened. Robert Hayes walked in. But he didn't look like he'd been relaxing in Portugal for 2 months. He looked tired. His silver hair was a bit longer than usual. His face was leaner. And he was carrying a battered lunch pail that looked distinctly out of place in the polished conference room. "Good morning," Robert said quietly, setting the lunch pail on the table. "Thank you all for coming." He remained standing, surveying the room with eyes that seemed to see everything. 2 months ago," he began, "I told this board that I needed to step away, that I needed perspective, that I needed to understand what Meridian had become in my absence." He paused. "I wasn't entirely truthful about how I planned to gain that perspective." He reached into the lunch pail and pulled out a navy blue coverall, laying it on the table. For the past 60 days, I worked in this building as a night janitor. Different name, different badge. Completely invisible to everyone who works here. The room erupted. Victor felt the blood drain from his face. You what? He managed. Robert's gaze fixed on him, calm and unwavering. I wanted to see the truth. Not the sanitized reports and carefully curated presentations. The real truth. The way people act when they think no one important is watching. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the conference room's display screen. A spreadsheet appeared, dense with notes and observations. I watched and listened. I collected stories. I learned who we really are as a company. Robert's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the gentleness. And what I found both broke my heart and gave me hope. He clicked to the next slide. Photographs appeared. Screenshots of emails, memos, messages. Victor recognized his own handwriting on several. I found executives who see employees as line items. Managers who take credit for others' work. Leaders who scream at their assistants when the door is closed. Another click. I found toxic cultures hidden behind corporate values statements. I found people working until they collapse because they're too afraid to say no. I found good people being discarded like trash because someone needed to improve a quarterly margin. Victor's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Mr. Hayes, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, every decision I made was in the company's best interest. The market is competitive. We need to be lean. We need to. Be quiet, Victor. The room went silent. Robert Hayes rarely raised his voice, but when he did, it carried the weight of absolute authority. I'm not finished. Robert advanced to the next slide. Because I also found something else. I found people who stay late to mentor interns. I found assistants who bring lunch to security guards. I found teams that protect each other and celebrate each other and lift each other up, despite working for managers who don't deserve their loyalty. The images changed. Priya asleep at her desk, working until midnight. James's daughter's photograph, carefully placed where he would see it. Lena crying in the lobby at 4 a.m., then clutching a white business card like a promise. I found the gap between who we say we are and who we actually are. And that gap, ladies and gentlemen, is going to close today. Robert turned to face Victor directly. On Friday, you terminated 12 employees. You called it restructuring. You said it would improve our margins. He pulled out a document and slid it across the table. I had our finance team run the numbers over the weekend. Want to know how much those 12 salaries actually impacted our quarterly margins? Victor picked up the document with trembling hands. 0.03%, Robert said. You destroyed 12 lives, 12 families, 12 futures, for a 0.03% improvement in a metric that you plan to present to this board as evidence of your leadership. I was trying to show initiative, Victor said desperately. Trying to prove I could make tough decisions. Tough decisions? Robert's voice was soft, but it cut like a blade. Let me tell you about tough decisions, Victor. Tough decisions are what James Okafor makes every day, working a full-time job while raising a daughter alone after his wife died. Tough decisions are what Priya Sharma faces, supporting her elderly parents while trying to prove herself in a company that works her to exhaustion and gives her no credit. Tough decisions are what Lena Torres lives with, choosing between her rent and her mother's medication. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. You made easy decisions, Victor. You sacrificed other people's lives to make yourself look good. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. The board members were watching in stunned silence. Victor felt his career crumbling beneath him. You're firing me, he said flatly. Yes, Robert said simply. You're terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive the same severance package you gave those 12 people. 2 weeks. I think that's fair, don't you? Victor stood. His face flushed with anger and humiliation. You're making a mistake, Hayes. I made this company profitable. I made the hard choices you were too soft to make. This company needs people who understand that business isn't about feelings. It's about results. Get out, Robert said quietly. Now. After Victor had left, Slamming the door behind him, Robert turned to the remaining executives. Anyone else? He asked. Anyone else who thinks that cruelty is the same thing as competence? Who thinks that people are disposable? This is your chance to leave with some dignity. No one moved. Good, Robert said. Because we're going to rebuild this company the right way. Starting today. He pulled up a new document on the screen. First, all 12 people who were terminated on Friday are being rehired, with raises and formal apologies. Second, I'm implementing an anonymous ethics hotline that reports directly to me. Third, we're conducting a full cultural audit of every department, and any manager who rules through fear or intimidation will be retrained or replaced. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. Fourth, we're investing $2 million in an employee development and scholarship program. Fifth, we're instituting a policy that no executive can make more than 20 times the salary of our lowest paid employee. And sixth, starting next month, I'll be spending 1 week per quarter working in a different department at entry level, under an assumed identity so I never lose sight of what we actually are. One of the board members, Margaret Chun, who'd been with the company since the beginning, was smiling through tears. You really did it, she said. You really went undercover as a janitor. I did, Robert confirmed. And I learned more in 2 months of emptying trash cans than in 2 years of reading reports. Because people tell the truth to janitors. They don't perform. They don't posture. They're just themselves. What made you think of doing this? Another board member asked. Robert was quiet for a moment. My father, he said finally, was a janitor. Worked nights his whole life so my mother could work days and someone would always be home with me and my brothers. People looked right through him like he was invisible. But he saw everything. He knew which executives were honest and which ones cheated on their expense reports. He knew which employees were struggling and which ones were thriving. He knew the truth. His voice grew thick with emotion. When he died, his funeral was packed. People I'd never met, telling me stories about how my father had helped them. A loan when someone couldn't make rent. A listening ear when someone was going through a divorce. A recommendation that got someone's kid into college. He was just a janitor. But he changed more lives than most CEOs ever do. Robert looked around the room. I built this company to honor him. To prove that business could be profitable and humane. That success and kindness weren't mutually exclusive. Somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. I got comfortable in my executive suite, trusting other people to maintain the culture while I focused on strategy and growth. So you became a janitor to find your way back, Margaret said softly. Yes, Robert said. I became invisible so I could finally see clearly. At 9 a.m., Robert sent an email to the entire company. To all Meridian employees. This morning I returned from a 2-month sabbatical, but I wasn't in Portugal as you may have heard. I was here working alongside you as a night janitor under an assumed name. I did this because I needed to understand who we've become. I needed to see beyond the presentations and metrics and polished surfaces. I needed to know the truth. What I found troubled me deeply. I found good people being treated poorly. I found cruelty disguised as efficiency. I found a gap between our stated values and our lived reality. But I also found extraordinary kindness, resilience, and dedication. I found people who embody the values I dreamed of when I started this company 30 years ago. Today we begin making changes. Some of you will see new policies. Some will see leadership changes. Some will receive calls apologizing for injustices and offering renewed opportunities. To those who've been working in the shadows, the night security guards, the cleaning crews, the maintenance staff, the assistants and coordinators who keep this place running, I see you. You matter. Your dignity matters. We're going to be better. Not because it looks good on a corporate values poster, but because it's right. Thank you for your patience as we find our way back to ourselves. Robert Hayes, CEO Meridian Tech. By 10 a.m., Lena Torres received a phone call from HR. Miss Torres, we need you to come in today if possible. There's been an error regarding your termination. Lena's hand shook as she held the phone. An error? Yes. We're reinstating your position with a raise and a formal apology. And Mr. Hayes would like to speak with you personally about a new role we're creating. At 11 a.m., James Okafor got a similar call. Then Priya Sharma. Then all 12 people who'd walked out with boxes on Friday. By noon, the entire company was buzzing. The janitor was the CEO. Victor Brennan was gone. Everything was changing. Derek, finishing his night shift before heading to his nursing classes, received an email. We're creating a scholarship program for employees pursuing healthcare degrees. You're our first recipient. Full tuition coverage plus a more flexible shift schedule. Apply at the link below. He read it 3 times, tears streaming down his face, then immediately called his mother to tell her that maybe, just maybe, his impossible dream was becoming possible. At 2 p.m., Lena Torres sat in Robert Hayes's office. A surprisingly modest space with family photos on the desk and worn carpet that could have been replaced years ago but somehow felt honest. "Thank you for coming," Robert said, gesturing to a chair. "I wanted to apologize personally for what happened on Friday." "Sir, I don't understand," Lena said. Were you the janitor who talked to me?" At 4 a.m. in the lobby. Robert smiled gently. "Yes. And you showed me something important that night. You showed me grace under pressure, dignity in despair, concern for your family, even when your own world was collapsing." He slid a folder across the desk. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Community Investment. It'll oversee our scholarship program, our community partnerships, and our employee assistance initiatives. The salary is twice what you were making. I'd like you to consider taking it." Lena stared at the folder, unable to move. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" "Because you understand what it means to struggle. Because you'll never forget what it felt like to get that termination email. Because you'll fight for people the way I should have been fighting for them all along." Robert's eyes were kind. "And because when I was invisible, you treated me with respect. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Lena thought of her mother waiting for news. Her brother trying to stay in school. All the impossible choices she'd been preparing to make. "I accept," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you so much." That afternoon, Robert held an all-hands meeting in the company auditorium. Every employee was there. Curiosity and uncertainty etched on their faces. Robert stood on the stage, no podium between him and his people. "I owe you all an explanation," he began. 2 months ago, I realized I'd lost touch with this company's soul. I'd built something meaningful, but I wasn't sure if that meaning had survived our growth. So I did something unconventional. I became a janitor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I wanted to see the truth. And I did. I saw both the best and worst of who we are. I saw kindness that made me proud and cruelty that made me ashamed." He paused. "But here's what I want you to know. This company belongs to all of us. Not just the executives. Not just the board. Every person who shows up and does their work with integrity and care. You own this place too." He looked out at the sea of faces. "We're making changes. Some will be hard. Some will be uncomfortable. But they're all aimed at one goal. Becoming a company where people matter more than metrics. Where kindness is valued as much as competence. Where you can tell your children you're proud of where you work." A hand went up in the audience. A young woman from customer service. "Mr. Hayes, how do we know this will last? How do we know things won't just go back to the way they were?" Robert nodded, appreciating the question. "Because I'm not disappearing into my office anymore. Because we're building accountability into every level of leadership. And because you all now have my personal phone number." He displayed it on the screen behind him. "If you see something wrong, if someone's being mistreated, if we're falling back into bad patterns, you call me directly. Day or night. I'll answer." Another hand. Derek, the security guard, standing in the back. "Sir, why did you choose to be a janitor specifically?" Robert's face softened. "Because my father was a janitor. And he taught me that there's no such thing as an unimportant job. Only people who fail to see the importance." He smiled. Also, you all talk a lot more freely around janitors. It's amazing what you learn when you're invisible. Laughter rippled through the auditorium, releasing some of the tension. One last thing, Robert said. I learned all of your names while I was working nights. Every single person in this building. And I'm going to remember them. Because you're not employee numbers or line items on a budget. You're people. You're the reason this company exists. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Robert noticed something. Employees were stopping to shake hands with the cleaning crew, saying hello to the security guards, seeing the people they'd been walking past invisibly for years. Margaret Chun approached Robert as the auditorium emptied. You did it, she said. You actually pulled it off. We'll see, Robert replied. Talk is easy. The real test is whether we can maintain this 6 months from now. A year from now. Why do you think we can? Robert thought about Lena in the lobby, crying but still worried about her family. About James placing his daughter's photo back on his desk with shaking hands. About Priya wrapping up her coffee mug, grateful for the kindness of a jacket from a stranger. Because there are more good people here than bad ones, he said. They just needed someone to believe in them, to see them, to prove that kindness isn't weakness and that dignity isn't optional. Your father would be proud, Margaret said softly. I hope so, Robert replied. I really hope so. That evening, Elena was waiting for him on their back porch with 2 glasses of wine and questions in her eyes. How did it go? She asked as Robert sank into his chair with a grateful sigh. Hard. Necessary. Right. He took her hand. Thank you for supporting this crazy idea. It wasn't crazy, Elena said. It was you. The man I fell in love with 40 years ago. The one who believed that business should lift people up, not grind them down. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their garden. Do you think it'll work? Elena asked finally. Can you really change a company's culture from the top down? I don't know, Robert admitted. But I know I can't change it from behind a desk, reading reports and trusting other people to maintain values. I've never personally defended. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, this is Lena Torres. I just wanted to say thank you again. You gave me my life back today. I'll never forget it. Robert showed Elena the message, his eyes bright with emotion. That, he said quietly, is why it'll work. 6 months later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Robert Hayes walked into Meridian Tech wearing his coveralls again. The receptionist looked up in surprise. Mr. Hayes? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Andrea, he said with a smile. Just starting my quarterly rotation. This week I'm working in facilities maintenance. Word spread through the building like wildfire. The CEO was doing it again. Going invisible. Living his own policies. But this time something was different. This time people noticed. James Okafor, now a senior engineer leading a team of 5, stopped Robert in the hallway. Mr. Hayes, thank you for what you did. For seeing that photograph. For giving me another chance. He pulled out his phone, showing Robert a new picture. His daughter graduating with honors. She got the Meridian Scholarship. Full ride. She's going to be an engineer like her dad. Robert felt his throat tighten. She earned that, James. You both did. In the marketing department, Priya Sharma, now a director with a team that actually went home at reasonable hours, was leading a presentation about work-life balance initiatives. Our productivity is up 18% since we stopped glorifying overwork, she told her team. Turns out rested people do better work. Who knew? Her team laughed, but there was real joy in the room. A lightness that hadn't existed before. Lena Torres sat in her new office on the 6th floor, reviewing scholarship applications. Each one was a life, a story, a family's hopes compressed into forms and essays. She read every single one carefully, remembering what it felt like to be on the other side of that desperation. Her phone rang. Her mother's number. Mija, the doctor says the new treatment is working. The medication you got approved through the Employee Assistance Program. It's actually working. Lena closed her eyes, gratitude washing over her. That's wonderful, Mama. That's so wonderful. After she hung up, she looked at the business card Robert had given her 6 months ago, now framed on her wall. Your story isn't over. Your worth is infinite. Better days are coming. Better days had come. For her. For James. For Priya and Derek and dozens of others. But Lena understood something important now. Better days didn't just happen. Someone had to choose to create them. That afternoon, the leadership team gathered for their weekly meeting. The atmosphere was different now. More honest, less performative. People disagreed openly without fear of retaliation. They admitted mistakes without panic. They celebrated each other's successes without jealousy. Margaret Chun presented the quarterly results. Revenue is up 6%. Employee satisfaction scores have increased 42 points. Turnover is down 60%. And we're getting applications from top talent who specifically cite our culture as the reason they want to work here. She looked at Robert. Whatever you did by becoming a janitor, it worked. We're profitable and humane. Just like you always said we could be. But Robert shook his head gently. I didn't do this. We all did. Every person who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Every manager who protected their team instead of exploiting them. Every employee who spoke up when they saw something wrong. He paused. That's the secret. Culture isn't built by one person making a grand gesture. It's built by 1,000 people making small choices every single day. After the meeting, Robert returned to his maintenance rounds. He was fixing a leaky faucet in the 3rd floor bathroom when he overheard 2 new employees talking in the hallway. Is it true? One asked. About the CEO working as a janitor? Yeah, my manager told me. He does it every quarter now. Works in different departments under different names. Says he never wants to lose sight of what the company actually is. That's either really inspiring or really weird. Maybe both, the first employee laughed. But I'll tell you what, I've worked at 3 other tech companies and this is the only place where people actually seem to care. About the work, about each other. It's different here. Robert smiled to himself as he tightened the faucet. Different. That was exactly what they'd been trying to build. That evening, Derek, now in his final semester of nursing school and working reduced hours to focus on his studies, stopped by Robert's office. Mr. Hayes, do you have a minute? Always, Robert said, gesturing to a chair. How are your classes going? Good. Great, actually. I'm on track to graduate in May. Derek's face was serious. I wanted to tell you something. That scholarship you gave me, it didn't just pay for school. It gave me permission to believe in myself. To think that maybe I wasn't crazy for dreaming of something more. He pulled out a letter and handed it to Robert. I got accepted to the surgical nursing program at Johns Hopkins. It's one of the best in the country. I start in the fall. Robert read the letter, pride swelling in his chest. Derek, this is incredible. Congratulations. I wouldn't be here without you, Derek said, his voice thick. Without that night when you noticed I was studying. Without you seeing me when I felt invisible. You were never invisible, Derek. I just had to become invisible myself to remember how to really see people. After Derek left, Robert sat alone in his office, surrounded by the photographs of employees whose lives had changed over the past 6 months. James and his daughter. Priya and her well-rested team. Lena and the scholarship recipients she was helping. Derek in his nursing scrubs beaming. But there were other photographs too. Employees who'd been fired for genuine cause, misconduct, harassment, ethical violations. The culture shift had meant accountability for everyone, not just those at the bottom. Robert had learned that kindness didn't mean tolerating cruelty. That compassion didn't mean avoiding necessary consequences. That building a humane company sometimes meant making hard choices to protect good people from bad actors. It was complicated. It was messy. It was real. Elena called as he was preparing to leave for the day. How was your first day back in coveralls? She asked. Humbling. Enlightening. Necessary. He smiled. I fixed a toilet, cleaned 3 conference rooms, and overheard two employees say this company is different. I'll count that as a win. Come home, my love. I made your favorite. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But before he left, Robert did one more thing. He pulled out his phone and recorded a voice memo, something he'd started doing after each quarterly rotation. Day 1 of Q3 rotation, facilities maintenance. Observations. The new leadership in operations is holding strong. People seem genuinely happy. I overheard a conversation about how this place is different, which suggests the culture is becoming self-sustaining rather than dependent on my personal intervention. That's the goal. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Challenges. There's still a tendency in some departments to revert to old habits when stressed, overwork, poor communication, blame shifting. We need to keep reinforcing that crisis doesn't excuse cruelty. Also noted some tension between legacy employees, who remember the old culture, and new hires who've only known the new one. That's actually healthy. Means we're genuinely changing, not just performing change. Another pause. Personal reflection. I miss my father every day, but especially during these rotations. I wish I could tell him that his life's work, all those nights he spent emptying trash cans and listening to people and showing quiet kindness, it mattered. It shaped me. To shape this company. He was never just a janitor. He was a teacher, and I'm still learning his lessons. Robert ended the recording and headed home. 3 months later, on a bright December morning, Meridian Tech held its annual holiday celebration. The entire company gathered in the main auditorium, not for presentations or awards, but simply to celebrate together. Robert stood at the edge of the crowd watching. Executives sat next to janitors. Engineers chatted with security guards. The invisible had become visible, and the visible had learned to see. Lena approached with a young woman in tow. Her brother Javier, home from college for winter break. Mr. Hayes, I wanted you to meet Javi. He just finished his first semester with a 4.0, and he got the Meridian Scholarship for next year. Robert shook Javier's hand. Congratulations. Your sister tells me you're studying environmental science. Yes, sir. I want to work on climate solutions. My sister says you believe in investing in people's dreams, not just their current utility. Javier smiled. That's the kind of company I want to work for someday. The kind that sees potential, not just productivity. After they walked away, Margaret Chun appeared at Robert's side. You look contemplative, she observed. I'm thinking about legacy, Robert said. About what we leave behind. About whether this will outlast me. It will, Margaret said with certainty. Because you didn't just change policies, Robert. You changed people. You showed them a different way of being. And they're showing others. That's how legacy works. It multiplies. Robert's phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Got my first job offer. Surgical nurse at Hopkins. I start in June. Thank you for believing in the invisible kid at the security desk. Then another text from James. My daughter got engaged. She wants you to walk her down the aisle with me. Says you're the reason she got to finish college and meet her fiancé. Would you do us the honor? And another from Priya. Just got headhunted by 3 different companies. Turned them all down. I'm building something here that matters more than a bigger salary. Thank you for giving me the space to grow. Robert showed the messages to Margaret, his eyes bright. That's legacy, she said softly. The celebration continued around them. Music and laughter and the sound of people genuinely enjoying each other's company. Robert noticed the small things. A senior vice president helping a janitor carry supplies. An intern confidently sharing ideas with the director. A security guard being thanked by name by a dozen different people. The invisible had become visible. And the visible had learned that everyone matters. As the evening wound down, Robert found himself in conversation with a group of new hires. People who'd been attracted to Meridian specifically because of its reputation for treating people well. Is it true you still work as a janitor every quarter? One asked. Yes, Robert confirmed. Different role each time. Last quarter I was in customer service. Next quarter I'll be in the warehouse. Why? You're the CEO. You don't have to do that. Robert considered the question carefully. Because the moment I think I'm too important to empty a trash can or answer a customer complaint or load a truck, I've lost sight of what this company actually is. We're not a hierarchy with important people at the top and disposable people at the bottom. We're a community where every role matters and every person deserves dignity. He smiled. Plus, people tell janitors the truth. And I never want to be so far removed from truth that I start believing my own presentations. The new hires nodded, absorbing this. That's why I took this job, one said. My last company said all the right things about values and culture. But it was just words. Here you actually live it. We try, Robert said. And when we fail, because we will fail, we own it and we fix it. That's the commitment. Later that night, Robert and Elena sat in their living room, the Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner. Robert held a letter he'd received that afternoon. A note from Victor Brennan, the COO he'd fired 6 months ago. Should I read it? He asked Elena. Only if you want to. Robert opened the letter. Robert, I've spent the past 6 months angry. Angry at you. Angry at myself. Angry at the world. But mostly at myself. I got a new job, another COO position at a smaller firm, and I found myself making the same decisions, cutting people, choosing metrics over humans, calling it tough leadership. Then I got fired again. For the same reasons. I'm writing because I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. It's not that business can't be competitive. It's that cruelty isn't the same thing as competence. That efficiency isn't an excuse for cruelty. That you can be profitable without being poisonous. I don't expect forgiveness or another chance. I just wanted you to know that your lesson, painful as it was, may have saved me from becoming someone I couldn't live with. I hope Meridian is thriving. I hope the people I hurt have healed. I hope you're still emptying trash cans and learning truth. Victor. Robert set down the letter, emotions swirling. What are you thinking? Elena asked. That redemption is possible. That people can change. That maybe the lesson extended beyond just our company. He looked at his wife. Should I respond? What does your heart say? Robert picked up his phone and typed. Victor, thank you for your honesty. Change is hard. Growth is painful. The fact that you're willing to examine yourself is the first step toward becoming the leader you're capable of being. If you ever want to talk, my number is still the same. The one I gave to everyone as a janitor. Still works. Robert. After he hit send, Elena took his hand. You can't save everyone, she said gently. No, Robert agreed. But I can offer everyone a chance. What they do with it is up to them. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the tree lights twinkle. Do you have any regrets? Elena asked. About the janitor experiment? About appending the company? Robert thought about it carefully. No, he said finally. The only thing I regret is that I let things drift so far before I did something about it. That I trusted systems and structures instead of staying connected to people. You fixed it. We fixed it, Robert corrected. All of us together. That's the only way it works. 6 more months passed. The 1-year anniversary of Robert's return from his janitor sabbatical arrived with little fanfare, exactly as he wanted it. But the company marked it in small ways. Employees shared stories on the internal message board about moments when leadership had chosen kindness, when managers had protected their teams, when someone in power had used that power to lift others up. Lena shared the story of the 4 a.m. conversation in the lobby and the business card that saved her life. James shared about the photograph mysteriously placed on his desk and the second chance that followed. Priya shared about waking up with a jacket over her shoulders and realizing someone had seen her exhaustion and cared. Derek shared about a janitor who'd noticed he was studying and had somehow made nursing school possible. The stories multiplied. Dozens, then hundreds. Small acts of seeing. Small choices to care. Small moments that had changed everything. Robert read them all, tears streaming down his face. That afternoon, he called an all-hands meeting. The auditorium was packed. The company had grown by 30% in the past year, all people attracted by the reputation they'd built. 1 year ago, Robert began, I stood here and told you I'd spent 2 months working as a janitor. I told you I'd seen both the best and worst of who we were. I promised we'd change. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Today I want to thank you. Because you kept that promise. Not me. You. Every single person in this room who chose to see their colleagues as human beings. Who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Who chose to build something that matters. He pulled up a slide showing their metrics. We're more profitable than ever. We're growing faster than projections. We're attracting the best talent in the industry. And we're doing it while treating people well. We're proof that you don't have to choose between success and humanity. Robert's voice grew thick with emotion. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't on any spreadsheet. It's that when I walk these halls now, whether I'm wearing a suit or coveralls, I see people who are genuinely happy to be here. I see dignity. I see respect. I see community. He smiled through his tears. My father was a janitor. He died believing he'd lived a small life. But he taught me that there's no such thing as a small life. That every interaction matters. That how you treat people when no one's watching is the truest measure of character. Robert gestured around the room. You all honor his memory every day. Every time you notice someone who others overlook. Every time you extend kindness to someone struggling. Every time you choose to see people rather than walking past them invisibly. He let the silence settle. I'm going to keep doing my quarterly rotations. I'm going to keep becoming invisible so I can see clearly. And I truly hope, that each of you will look for ways to see the invisible people in your own lives. The janitors and security guards and delivery drivers and assistants who keep the world running, while others take credit. Because here's what I learned in those 2 months. Everyone has a story. Everyone matters. Everyone deserves to be seen. The applause started slowly, then built to something that sounded like thunder. After the meeting, Robert returned to his office to find an unexpected visitor. Victor Brennan stood in the hallway, looking older and humbler than Robert remembered. I didn't think you'd see me, Victor said quietly. Come in, Robert replied. They sat across from each other, the desk between them feeling like an ocean. I'm not here for a job, Victor said quickly. I'm here to apologize. Properly. Face to face. He took a deep breath. I hurt people. I destroyed lives to make myself look good. I confused cruelty with competence. And I'm sorry. Robert nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. I've been in therapy, Victor continued, working through why I thought I had to prove myself by diminishing others. It's been hard. Seeing myself clearly. It's always hard, Robert said gently. I had to become invisible to see clearly. You had to lose everything. We all have our paths to truth. I started volunteering, Victor said. At a homeless shelter. Doing intake work. Listening to people's stories. Seeing them. He smiled sadly. Turns out, when you actually see people, it's a lot harder to treat them as disposable. What are you doing now? For work. Consulting. But different than before. I help companies audit their cultures. Identify toxic patterns. Build systems that protect people. Victor met Robert's eyes. I use your janitor experiment as a case study. With your permission. You have it, Robert said. If it helps even one company treat people better, it's worth it. Victor stood to leave, then paused. The 12 people I fired, are they still here? 11 of them. One moved across the country for family reasons, but she left on good terms. The others are thriving. I'm glad, Victor said. And he meant it. After he left, Robert sat alone, marveling at the strange paths of redemption. That evening, Robert came home to find Elena in the kitchen, cooking dinner and humming along to music. She looked up when he entered, her face glowing with the kind of joy that comes from a life well lived. Good day, she asked. The best, Robert replied, wrapping his arms around her. Victor came by. To apologize. And I think he meant it. I think he's genuinely changed. Robert rested his chin on her shoulder. It makes me think about all the other victors out there. People who think cruelty is strength. Who think kindness is weakness. What if they could learn differently? You can't fix everyone, my love. No, Robert agreed. But maybe I can tell the story. Maybe someone else will hear it and decide to become invisible for a while. To see the truth. Elena turned in his arms. You know what I love about you? After 40 years, after building a successful company, after everything you've accomplished, you're still the same person I fell in love with. Still believing that kindness matters. Still fighting for people others overlook. Your father would be so proud. Robert felt tears sting his eyes. I hope so. I really hope so. They stood together in the kitchen, swaying slightly to the music, wrapped in decades of love and partnership and shared purpose. What's next? Elena asked. Another quarterly rotation? Next week. I'm going to be a delivery driver. Robert smiled. I want to see how customers experience us. Whether the kindness extends beyond our walls. Of course it does, Elena said with certainty. Because you built something real. Something that changes people. Late that night, Robert couldn't sleep. He got up and went to his study, pulling out the old photograph of his father, a black and white image of a man in coveralls, mop in hand, smiling at the camera with dignity in his eyes. I did it, Dad, Robert whispered to the photograph. I built the company you would have been proud of, where janitors matter as much as CEOs, where everyone is seen, where kindness isn't weakness. It's the whole point. He thought about the journey, about becoming invisible, about learning to see, about the 12 people whose lives had been upended and then restored, about Derek pursuing his nursing dream, about Lena leading the scholarship program, about James walking his daughter down the aisle, about Victor learning that cruelty wasn't strength, about a company learning that profit and humanity weren't mutually exclusive, about the way small choices multiplied into cultural transformation. Robert picked up his journal and wrote, What I learned from being a janitor. 1. Everyone has a story worth hearing. 2. Character is revealed when no one important is watching. 3. The people we call invisible often see the clearest truth. 4. Kindness isn't soft, it's the hardest and most important work. 5. Culture isn't what we say in meetings, it's what we do in moments. 6. You can't lead people you don't see. 7. Dignity is not optional. It's fundamental. 8. Redemption is possible for those willing to do the work. 9. Legacy isn't built in grand gestures, it's built in daily choices. 10. My father was right. There are no small lives, only people who fail to see the importance of every life. He closed the journal and looked again at his father's photograph. Thank you, he said softly, for teaching me to see. For showing me that a man in coveralls pushing a mop can change the world by choosing kindness every single day. I hope I'm doing you proud, Dad. I hope you're somewhere watching, seeing that your life mattered more than you ever knew. That you raised a son who remembered your lessons. That your example built something that helps people. Robert sat in the quiet of his study, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Photographs of employees whose lives had changed, thank you notes from people who'd been seen, letters from parents whose children got scholarships, texts from people who'd been given second chances. And in the center of it all, the photograph of a janitor who'd taught his son the most important lesson of all. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone matters. Everyone has inherent worth that no job title or bank account can measure. The next morning, Robert woke early and put on his coveralls for next week's rotation. Elena watched from the bed, smiling. You know, she said, most CEOs spend their time trying to become more visible, more famous, more powerful. And here you are, doing everything you can to become invisible. Robert laughed. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe the most powerful thing you can do is make yourself invisible, so you can see what's really there. So you can hear truth instead of performance. He kissed her goodbye and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness. The city was still sleeping as Robert drove to the Meridian warehouse, where he'd spend this week working as a delivery driver. He'd load trucks, deliver packages, interact with customers, and see how the company's kindness, or lack of it, manifested in the world beyond their walls. As he pulled into the parking lot, he saw the first shift arriving. Warehouse workers, truck drivers, logistics coordinators. The people who made everything work but rarely got credit. Robert parked and walked toward the building, ready to become invisible again. Ready to see. Ready to learn. A young woman held the door for him, despite being loaded down with her own equipment. "Morning," she said with a genuine smile. "Morning," Robert replied. "Thank you." "No problem. We take care of each other here." And there it was. The culture they'd built. The values they'd embedded. The truth that had taken root and was growing, spreading, multiplying. "We take care of each other here." Robert smiled as he walked inside, ready for another week of being invisible, of seeing clearly, of learning the truth that only reveals itself when you're willing to disappear into the work and the lives of people others overlook. Because that was the real secret. True leadership wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing others. About making the invisible visible. About using whatever power you had to dignify every human being who crossed your path. His father had known this truth, had lived it every night in his coveralls, pushing his mop, noticing people, offering quiet kindness to everyone he met. And now Robert was living it too, honoring his father's memory by building a company, a community, where everyone mattered, where everyone was seen, where kindness wasn't a corporate value on a poster, but a lived reality in every interaction. As Robert signed in for his first shift as a delivery driver, using his assumed name, he thought about all the people whose lives had changed because someone had chosen to see them. James and his daughter, Lena and her family, Priya and her team, Derek and his nursing dream. And he thought about all the people he hadn't met yet, the customers he'd deliver packages to this week, the warehouse workers he'd collaborate with, the truth he'd discover about how Meridian showed up in the world. There was always more to learn, always more people to see, always more opportunities to choose kindness over indifference, dignity over dismissal, humanity over efficiency. The work was never done, but that was okay, because the work itself was the point, not the destination but the journey, not the achievement but the process, not being seen but seeing others. Robert picked up his first delivery manifest and headed toward the truck, ready for another day of being wonderfully, purposefully invisible, ready to see the truth that only reveals itself to those who stop trying to be important and start trying to be present, ready to honor his father's legacy by living it forward, one delivery at a time, one moment of kindness at a time, one person seen at a time, because that's how you change the world. Not with grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but with 1,000 small choices to see people, to value them, to treat them with the dignity they deserve. That's what his father had taught him. That's what he'd learned by becoming a janitor. And that's what he would spend the rest of his life teaching others. In the end, the story of Robert Hayes, the CEO who became a janitor, isn't really about business transformation or corporate culture. It's about something far more fundamental. The human need to be seen. We all walk through the world hoping someone will notice us, will acknowledge our effort, our struggle, our worth. We fear invisibility more than almost anything else because invisibility feels like erasure, like proof that we don't matter. But Robert discovered a paradox. Sometimes you have to become invisible to truly see. Sometimes you have to step out of the spotlight to notice all the people standing in the shadows. Sometimes you have to give up the trappings of importance to remember what actually matters. His father knew this, spent his whole life knowing it, lived it in coveralls with a mop in his hand, seeing people that others walked right past, offering kindness to everyone because everyone deserved kindness. The janitor who was secretly the CEO learned what his father already knew. There are no small lives, no unimportant people, no jobs beneath dignity. Only human beings trying to make their way through the world, hoping someone will see them, acknowledge them, treat them with respect. And when just one person chooses to see, really see, it changes everything. It changed James's life, giving him a second chance to provide for his daughter. It changed Lena's life, turning her from a fired employee into a leader helping others. It changed Priya's life, showing her that work could be sustainable and humane. It changed Derek's life, making his impossible dream suddenly possible. It even changed Victor's life, teaching him through loss what he couldn't learn through success. That cruelty isn't strength, that people aren't disposable, that how you treat others when you have power over them reveals everything about your character. But most importantly, it changed Robert's life. Reminded him why he built Meridian in the first place. Reconnected him to his father's legacy. Showed him that the most powerful thing a CEO could do was remember what it felt like to be invisible, and then use that memory to ensure no one else ever felt that way again. The story asks us a simple question. Who are you seeing today? Really seeing? The janitor cleaning your office? The security guard at your building? The barista making your coffee? The delivery driver leaving packages at your door? The assistant coordinating your schedule? The person serving your food? Checking your groceries? Answering your call for help? Are you seeing them? Acknowledging their humanity? Treating them with dignity? Or are you looking through them? Treating them as functions rather than people? Forgetting that they have families and dreams and struggles and stories worth knowing? Robert's father spent his life being invisible. But his impact was profound, radiating through his son and eventually through an entire company and all the lives it touched. Because he chose kindness every single day, even when no one important was watching. Especially when no one important was watching. That's the lesson. That's the truth Robert discovered by emptying trash cans at 2 a.m., and listening to people cry in empty lobbies, and noticing the small acts of grace and cruelty that reveal what we really are when the performance stops. Character isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when you think you're invisible. When you think it doesn't matter. When you think no one will notice or care. Everything matters. Everyone notices. Every interaction is an opportunity to dignify another human being, or to diminish them. And those choices accumulate, building either beauty or rot, either community or isolation, either a world where people matter or a world where only profit does. Robert chose beauty, chose community, chose to believe that business could be both profitable and humane, that success and kindness weren't mutually exclusive, that the highest calling of leadership was to see people and lift them up. He built a company his father would have been proud of, a place where janitors and CEOs mattered equally, where everyone was visible, where kindness wasn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. And he did it by becoming invisible, by remembering what his father knew, by learning to see. That's available to all of us. We don't have to be CEOs to make this choice. We just have to be human beings willing to see other human beings, to acknowledge them, to treat them with dignity, to remember that everyone we meet is carrying a burden we know nothing about, fighting a battle we can't see, hoping someone will notice them and care. Be that someone. See that person. Offer that kindness. Because you never know when your small gesture, a jacket draped over cold shoulders, a photograph placed upright, a conversation in a lonely lobby, a belief in someone's dream will change everything. You never know when the invisible person you're kind to will turn out to be someone important, or when you'll realize that every person is important, that importance isn't determined by titles or paychecks, but by the inherent worth we all carry simply by being human. The janitor might be the CEO, or the CEO might need to become the janitor to remember what matters. Either way, the lesson is the same. See people. All people. Treat everyone with dignity. Choose kindness even when it's inconvenient. Build a world where no one is invisible because we're all paying attention to each other, acknowledging each other, lifting each other up. That's how we honor those who came before us. That's how we build something that lasts. That's how we create the better world we all want to live in. One small choice at a time. One person seen at a time. One act of kindness at a time. Until invisibility becomes impossible because we've all learned to truly see.